Kentucky is a landscape people think they understand. Long stretches of hardwood forest, quiet mountain roads and small towns that rarely make the news. But over the last 2 years, that sense of familiarity has started to fracture. Hikers have vanished on marked trails inside Daniel Boone National Forest. Cars have been found running on rural roads with no drivers in sight. Triangular lights have appeared above the Appalachian ridgelines with no aircraft to explain them. And new forensic identifications are reopening cases officials thought were settled decades ago. Something is shifting here, and the silence isn't reassuring, it's tightening. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never see Kentucky the same way again. The Daniel Boone Forest missing hiker. Daniel Boone National Forest covers some of the most rugged terrain in the eastern United States. Sheer cliffs, dense hardwood stands and valleys where sound gets swallowed long before it reaches the next ridge. Hikers disappear here from time to time, usually due to injury or getting lost. But the case reported in late 2024 was different. The man who vanished knew the forest well. He was familiar with the trail, and the place where he disappeared offered no hiding places at all. The missing hiker was a 36-year-old from Lexington who frequently documented his hikes online. On the morning he vanished, he planned a short route near the Red River Gorge, a path he had filmed and posted about several times before. He signed in at the trailhead, logged his starting time, and sent a message to a friend saying he expected to be back before noon. Weather was stable, visibility was clear, conditions were ideal. Around 11 a.m., another hiker found the man's backpack neatly propped against a sandstone outcrop less than 2 miles from the trailhead. Inside were his water bottle, snacks and a portable GPS device, none of which he typically removed unless he was stopping for an extended break. His phone was not inside the pack. There were no signs of a struggle, no torn straps, no scuff marks on the rock, just a backpack placed with intention. Search teams arrived quickly. They found the man's footprints leading a short distance beyond the outcrop, but the trail ended abruptly on stable ground. No drag marks, no slide marks, no indication he slipped or climbed downward. The soil was compacted from regular foot traffic, and any sudden movement should have left visible disturbance. Instead, his tracks simply ceased. K9 units traced a faint scent line that curved toward a narrow ridge, but lost it at a point where the terrain was flat and unobstructed. Handlers noted the cutoff was unusually sharp, not weak, not scattered, but gone. A thermal drone sweep of the area revealed nothing. No heat signatures in hidden crevices. No signs of an injured hiker sheltered in vegetation. Witnesses offered fragments. 2 hikers on a nearby trail reported hearing something like a distant metallic knock around the same time the man's backpack was found. Another person described a sudden stillness in the forest. No wind, no birds, lasting nearly a minute. Experienced rangers said such silences can happen, but rarely so abruptly and not on clear weather mornings. Investigators reviewed the hiker's digital trail. His phone pinged a tower near the gorge around 10:15 a.m., then stopped transmitting. No outgoing messages. No emergency attempt. No battery drain anomaly. His GPS tracker showed no recorded movement beyond his last confirmed location, as if it had been turned off or shielded. Given the terrain, authorities expected at least one trace: broken brush, loose shale, skid marks, but found none. Even a misstep in the gorge typically leaves a clear path of descent. Here there was no descent at all. Families and volunteers continued searching through the end of the week. Nothing surfaced. No clothing, no gear, no signs of wildlife disturbance. The forest, vast as it is, normally gives something back. This time, it gave nothing. The case remains open, categorized as an unexplained disappearance. Rangers familiar with the incident say the location bothers them the most. It wasn't remote, it wasn't dangerous, and it wasn't the kind of place someone simply vanishes without leaving the forest a single clue to follow. Because some forests don't just take people, they erase the path behind them. The Pulaski County running car case. Just after 6 a.m. on a cold February morning in 2025, a commuter noticed something unusual on a rural stretch of Kentucky Highway 80. A sedan sitting on the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking. At first, it looked like a routine breakdown, the kind that happens before sunrise on empty roads. But as the driver slowed down, he realized the car's engine was still running. The exhaust plume rose steadily in the cold air, and the driver's door was open. When deputies arrived, the scene was unsettling in its precision. The vehicle wasn't damaged. It was pulled over cleanly, angled as if the driver intended only a brief stop. The headlights were on. The interior dome light glowed over an untouched wallet and a cell phone resting on the center console. The heater was blowing at medium strength, and there was no one inside. The missing driver was a 30-year-old Somerset resident who left home earlier than usual that morning. Cell tower records confirmed he had been driving normally until his signal abruptly dropped at 5:54 a.m., a drop that investigators later found unusual, since coverage in that section of Highway 80 is typically stable. His last phone activity was a voice assistant prompt that activated for less than 1 second before ending. Deputies examined the ground around the vehicle. There were no skid marks indicating the stop wasn't sudden. The gravel shoulder revealed only the car's tire impressions. There were no footprints leading away from the road, none toward the tree line, none crossing the shoulder, none looping back. It looked as if the driver never stepped onto the ground at all. Search teams expanded their scope quickly. A K9 unit picked up the driver's scent near the open door, but lost it within 10 feet, an unusually sharp cutoff for an outdoor environment with low wind. Aerial drones scanned the surrounding fields and woods, but detected no heat signatures. Thermal imaging from a helicopter produced nothing but livestock far from the scene. Several nearby residents reported odd sounds before dawn. One described hearing a short mechanical hum, like a transformer winding up, then shutting off. Another reported her porch light flickering at around the same time the driver's phone stopped transmitting. None of the reports indicated foul play, but all occurred within the same 10-minute window. Investigators reviewed highway cameras. A camera positioned nearly a mile east recorded the sedan passing normally at 5:47 a.m. The next camera west should have captured the vehicle minutes later, but it didn't. The footage was intact with no gaps, no corruption, no malfunction. It simply never recorded the car. The driver's family emphasized that he never stopped on highways unless absolutely necessary. His job required strict punctuality, and he was meticulous about maintaining routines. He kept his car spotless, locked his doors even in rural areas, and never left the heater running when stepping out. Yet here the heater was at mid-setting, the door wide open, and the keys still in the ignition. A deeper look at the phone revealed something stranger. The incomplete voice prompt recorded a fraction of a syllable, not enough to determine what he was trying to say. Digital forensics couldn't tell whether he attempted a command, tried to call someone, or was reacting to something outside the vehicle. Deputies searched extensively for any item the driver may have dropped: gloves, phone case, loose papers, but found nothing. Even the grassy areas near the shoulder showed no signs of disturbance. The car looked frozen in time, abandoned at the exact moment its driver intended to return. By the end of the week, investigators had no leads, no tracks, no witnesses, no digital trail. The car was towed, the engine had no mechanical issues, and the case joined the list of unexplained disappearances that share the same quiet signature: a running vehicle, an open door, and a person who stepped out as if only for a moment, then vanished completely. Because when a car keeps idling, the silence around it becomes the real problem. The Appalachian Triangular Lights. The Appalachian region of eastern Kentucky is no stranger to unusual sky reports. The valleys are deep, the ridgelines steep, and aircraft sound different as they echo through narrow hollows. But late in 2024, residents in Pike County began reporting something that didn't match planes, helicopters, drones, or anything common to the area. 3 bright lights forming a perfect triangle, moving in complete silence above the mountains. The first credible sighting came from a nurse driving home along US Route 23. She saw 3 white lights hovering over a ridge, evenly spaced and unnaturally steady. Thinking it was a military aircraft, she rolled down her window and heard nothing. Not a hum, not a rotor, not even wind displacement. The lights shifted sideways, maintaining their triangular formation, then rose vertically. She recorded the final seconds on her phone. In the clip, the lights remain perfectly aligned as they ascend. Days later, a group of ATV riders in Floyd County reported the same pattern. 3 lights hovering, drifting silently, then rotating as a single unit. One rider said it looked like a shape with lights, not lights moving on their own. His footage captured a brief moment where the lights dimmed simultaneously, as if responding to an internal command. What made the sightings harder to dismiss was the consistency. Witnesses described no sound even at low altitude, smooth lateral motion not affected by wind, sudden stops, impossible for conventional aircraft, triangles forming, holding and rotating without drift. These behaviors appeared repeatedly over a 3-month period, always at night, always in rural areas. FAA officials confirmed that no approved flights or training operations matched the times or flight paths of the sightings. Nearby airports in Prestonsburg and Pikeville reported no anomalies, and radar logs from the region showed no low-altitude objects during the reported windows. Residents also described environmental effects that accompanied the sightings. A man in a cabin near Banner reported that his radio emitted static bursts moments before he saw lights through the treetops. A woman in Pikeville said the crickets and frogs went silent for nearly a full minute before the lights appeared. Others mentioned a sudden temperature drop, not extreme, but sharp enough to notice. One of the clearest pieces of footage came from a homeowner in Harold. His security camera captured 3 lights gliding slowly above a tree line, then stopping mid-air. For a brief second, the brightness revealed a faint dark shape behind the lights, a triangular mass blocking the stars. Analysts who reviewed the video said the object lacked the navigation lights required by aircraft regulations and moved too slowly to stay airborne without visible propulsion. Skeptics pointed to drones, but experts quickly dismissed the theory. Commercial drones cannot maintain perfect geometric formation over long distances without drift, especially in wind channels common in the Appalachian valleys, and none are silent at close range. By early 2025, the sightings had increased. Some nights brought multiple reports from different towns, often within minutes of each other. Then, just as suddenly as they began, they stopped. No more lights. No new videos. No official explanation. Locals still talk about the pattern. They don't agree on what the lights were: experimental aircraft, misidentified drones, or something beyond current technology. But they agree on what made them unsettling. They moved with intention, scanning ridgelines and valleys as if searching for something. Authorities closed their inquiries without conclusions, but the videos remain online, and the silence that followed only deepened the mystery, because when the mountains go silent, the sky starts speaking. The 2025 Forensic Genealogy Identifications. In 2025, Kentucky authorities began releasing a series of forensic updates that quietly altered the landscape of several long, cold investigations. Across the state, particularly in eastern, central, and western counties, unidentified remains stored for decades were finally matched to real names. These identifications were made possible by genetic genealogy, a technique that compares degraded DNA to nationwide databases and constructs family lines to determine identity. What emerged from this effort wasn't closure, but a new set of questions that reopened cases once believed to be unsolvable. The first major match came from Laurel County. Remains discovered in 1998 off a wooded service road had been labeled as John Doe due to the lack of dental records or personal items. In early 2025, forensic genealogists identified the victim as a man from Ohio who had disappeared while traveling south. His family believed he relocated for work. They never imagined he had died in Kentucky. The identification forced investigators to re-examine evidence logged 27 years earlier, notes that now showed inconsistencies in the timeline, and witness accounts never followed up. Another identification surfaced in Henderson County. Skeletal remains found in 2004 near a drainage basin were linked to a woman originally from Missouri. She had been missing for years, but her disappearance fell into a jurisdictional gray area. States assumed she was in another state. With her name restored, detectives questioned neighbors and acquaintances from 2 decades earlier and discovered a potential connection to a person of interest who no longer lived in the region. That single name reopened a file that had sat untouched for almost 20 years. As cases continued to be identified, patterns began to emerge. Several victims had traveled far from where they were last seen. Some crossed multiple counties, others crossed state lines before disappearing. Investigators realized that many assumed voluntary disappearances were actually unresolved deaths hidden by poor communication between states, missing records, or incomplete early DNA methods. What troubled detectives most was how several of the newly identified victims had no clear cause of death, even after reanalysis. Some files listed undetermined, Others held autopsy notes with vague irregularities, small fractures inconsistent with falls, internal anomalies that didn't match natural causes, or injury markers with no clear explanation. These inconsistencies hinted that some victims may have met violent ends that went unnoticed or uninvestigated at the time. Families reacted in sharply different ways. Some found relief after decades of uncertainty. Others were devastated to learn their relatives had died far sooner than they believed. One family had continued sending holiday cards to a man they assumed was alive somewhere in the Midwest. Learning that he had died in Kentucky in the early 2000s reopened emotional wounds they never expected to revisit. For investigators, the renewed cases created logistical challenges. In many files, crucial evidence had deteriorated, gone missing, or been mislabeled. Witnesses had moved, forgotten details, or died. Addresses no longer existed. Entire neighborhoods had changed. Detectives called these reopened files fractured puzzles, stories missing key chapters that needed to be rebuilt through modern methods. By mid-2025, Kentucky's forensic teams had flagged additional unidentified remains as candidates for genetic testing. Each sample represented not just a person, but a potential investigation waiting to be resurrected. The scale of unidentified victims across the state suddenly looked larger and more complex than previously believed. The identifications did not close cases, they complicated them. They returned names but also returned every unanswered question attached to them, because the moment a name returns, the investigation begins again. The Western Kentucky Rural Disappearances. Western Kentucky is known for its wide stretches of farmland, quiet two-lane highways, and long distances between towns. It is the kind of place where a stalled vehicle stands out immediately, and where the disappearance of a driver creates ripples that travel fast. But in 2024 and early 2025, deputies across Hopkins, Muhlenberg, and Christian counties began noticing a pattern that didn't fit any normal missing person profile. Drivers vanishing along rural roads without leaving physical traces, with their vehicles left intact and undamaged. The first case occurred in Hopkins County. A 30-year-old man driving home from a late shift failed to arrive. His car was found the next morning pulled neatly onto the shoulder, door closed, keys in the ignition, and his phone placed face down on the passenger seat. The vehicle showed no sign of mechanical trouble. The interior was clean. No spilled drinks, no dropped items, nothing suggesting sudden distress. The ground outside was dry, yet no footprints surrounded the vehicle. The second case followed in Muhlenberg County. A woman returning from visiting family sent a message saying she was 15 minutes out. Her SUV was found later that night parked just off a gravel pull-off. The engine had cooled, meaning she had been gone for some time before discovery. Her purse was still inside. Her jacket hung neatly on the back seat. Deputies searched the nearby woods but found no prints, no discarded belongings, no signs she walked even a few feet from the vehicle. In early 2025, Christian County deputies responded to the third case. A truck found with its lights on, driver's door cracked open, and the radio frozen on static. The missing man's phone recorded a brief attempt to make a call around the time his vehicle stopped, a call that lasted exactly 1 second before disconnecting. Digital forensics showed no network outage in the area. What troubled investigators was the lack of physical evidence. In all three cases, no footprints, no drag marks, no trail into the brush, no signs of a struggle, no tire tracks indicating another vehicle pulled alongside. The cars looked as if they had been paused mid-routine, the occupant stepping out as if expecting to return, and then never doing so. Phone data deepened the mystery. Each disappearance occurred within areas where cell reception is typically stable, yet in all three cases, the missing person's device experienced abrupt signal failure moments before the disappearance. No gradual weakening, no battery drain, just instant loss of communication. K9 teams tracked scent trails that ended unnaturally quickly, sometimes within meters of the driver's door. A drone sweep revealed no heat signatures, no displaced vegetation, no sign of movement beyond the vehicle's immediate perimeter. Local residents began reporting strange environmental details. Brief drops in temperature, animals avoiding certain sections of the roadway, short bursts of static on portable radios, faint humming noises around dusk. None of these were harmful, but they formed a pattern investigators couldn't ignore. Authorities have been cautious in public statements, avoiding speculation about connections between the disappearances. The counties involved aren't adjacent in a perfect line, but the roads share similar conditions: low traffic, sparse lighting, and long stretches without service stations. What unsettles deputies is that all three victims were familiar with the routes, sober, healthy, and showed no signs of personal crisis. As of 2025, all cases remain open. Families continue searching, hoping for anything: a sighting, a dropped item, a single clue. But like the disappearances themselves, the investigation has produced silence instead of answers. Western Kentucky is wide, flat, and open. It should be the last place where a person vanishes quietly, because roads aren't supposed to let people vanish without a sound. 6 cases. 6 moments when ordinary life in Kentucky broke without warning. A hiker vanished on a familiar trail. A running car waited for a driver who never returned. Silent triangles moved over the Appalachian ridgelines. Old remains gained new identities. Rural roads erased people without explanation, and the river basin delivered deaths with no cause at all. These stories aren't just mysteries, they're reminders of how quickly routine can fracture into the unknown. If you made it this far, thank you. Leave a like, tell us which case stayed with you and which state comes next. Some landscapes don't hide their secrets. They wait.